tariff war that we have been seeing. We have breaking news coming in with Trump signaling a trade deal that is imminent. Now, that deal could be signed today is what Donald Trump is saying. And that means that, the talks are going as per schedule, as per plan. And this is Donald Trump there signaling a trade deal that is imminent, that could be signed today itself. So a huge announcement that is expected. Could that trade deal be signed? Of course, Priyanka joining us. And Priyanka, break it down for us, because this past few months that we have seen Donald Trump take up those tariffs almost to 100%. And that is something, basically when we talk about commodities in the United States, how much is the United States dependent on goods coming out of China? And that really is the big question.
Well, Donald Trump is now signaling that a trade deal with China is imminent, and it's a strong indication that today's meeting is moving very well beyond symbolic diplomacy here. Trump has repeatedly emphasized his personal chemistry with Xi Jinping, calling him a tough negotiator, but stressing that the two leaders know each other well and have reached an agreement on key elements. And this also suggests meaningful progress behind closed doors, not just at today's meeting. So if that agreement is formalized today, it will mark a significant momentum in U.S.-China relations, and it also signals a thaw in economic tensions and potentially easing pressure on global trade flows, technology supply chains, and markets. But, in terms of U.S. dependence, in 2024, U.S. goods import from China were about $438 billion, and U.S. total trade, which is goods and services with China, was about $658 billion. So Chinese goods make up a significant portion of the U.S. total goods imports, about 13.5 or 14%. The U.S. share of imports from China has been falling, though, with that being said, from a peak of about 22% in 2017 to 13.9% in 2023. And it's in critical sectors like communications and IT. Dependence remains higher. U.S. imports of communication-related goods from China were around 44% in 2023. There's also hidden dependence here. U.S. imports from other countries that still use Chinese inputs or components. So it's not directly what the U.S. takes from China. It's also what China supplies and imports to other countries that the U.S. needs. So the U.S. cannot simply assume that it's fully self-sufficient or that replacing China overnight is feasible here. The decoupling process is ongoing and partial. Because China retains significant upstream control, especially in electronics, rare earth processing, intermediate goods, the U.S. remains vulnerable to disruptions, even if the import share drops. This explains why trade and tech talks with China are so intense and important today. The U.S. wants to reduce both the volume and the strategic risk of dependence. And for allied countries like India, this dynamic presents an opportunity. If U.S. firms diversify away from China, India could position itself as a trusted alternative. But it also means that India must ensure its own dependencies are managed, or it could become a new risk node for India as well. So bottom line, the U.S. remains significantly dependent on China in many goods and supply chain areas, but the dependency is moderating. The key question now is not just how much trade the U.S. does with China, but how much strategic leverage and control China retains in the value chain and critical inputs domains.
Well, let's get in Daniel here. Daniel, of course, we do know trade tariffs, trafficking of fentanyl, a drug responsible for tens of thousands of deaths in the United States each year. We also have, when we talk about the soybean export, we also talk about, Priyanka mentioned semiconductors, of course, all of that. Technology is playing a big part of this meeting as well. But who, in your opinion, would you say has the upper hand here?
I think neither country has the upper hand. And I know that may be a little bit of a cop-out, but I really think it's true. Both of these states have points of leverage that are really valuable and powerful. As you just noted, on the China side, there's the processing and production of rare earth minerals. There's also the exporting of fentanyl precursors. These are large concerns and problems for the United States in their own ways. But the United States still has the world's most advanced chips. Its allies produce some of the world's most advanced chip equipment in terms of making and production of chips. And the United States is an enormous market for Chinese goods. So I think both of these countries and both of these governments have real points of leverage. And I think that's actually probably one of the reasons why Trump has backed off a little bit from tariffs when it comes to China. It's because this is a country where the American economy is much more evenly matched than it is with some of the other countries where he's been slapping and firing tariffs on. So I think it's really hard to say what that means in terms of where the negotiations are going to go. I'm not entirely sure. My guess is we will see some sort of partial deal as both these countries recognize that there is still something to be gained from the two having commerce with each other. But again, I think the structural forces that are pitting them in competition are very powerful. And so I'm skeptical of kind of a major breakthrough in the long term.
Right. Priyanka, how strong are their negotiating, positions when we talk about the power between the two leaders? And of course, we do know that Trump always wants his way, but he has to offer a lot more this time around. And it's going to be very different from the meetings that he's had in the past, say with Prime Minister Modi or with Putin or with, say, the Ukrainian leader as well.
Well, Trump always wants his way, but let's not forget Xi always wants his way too. And he does a lot of underhanded things that nobody in the world likes. But I think, unlike Daniel, I'm going to take a stand here. In the immediate moment, I'm going to say that the United States does have the upper hand, particularly heading into these talks. And why I say that is, number one, economic pressure. The U.S. economy is slowing, but it is far more resilient than China's today, which is facing a real estate crisis. It's facing youth unemployment, capital flight, slowing exports. So Beijing needs market confidence and stability more urgently than the United States does. Number two is the tech chokehold. America controls the global semiconductor ecosystem, design, architecture, cutting edge fabrication tools. China cannot leapfrog this in the short term. Washington's export controls remain one of the most powerful economic levers in the world. Number three is strategic coalitions. The U.S. has a strong alliance network. Japan, South Korea, where the talks are being held, the EU, Australia, and India via the Quad. China has economic partners, but not deep strategic allies. So diplomatically, the U.S. has a broader support base and greater ability to build pressure coalitions. And four, of course, is the narrative advantage. In global diplomacy, China wants to appear stable, rational, and open, especially as Xi pursues long-term goals. Trump is projecting warmth and optimism, but Trump projecting that here is very strategic because it puts Beijing on the back foot publicly if talks stall. So where China holds counter leverage to, that also isn't trivial. We have to look at that as well. China, where they take favor is China controls key inputs like rare earths, huge manufacturing base, can't forget about that. It can move quickly without political friction. It has military momentum in its region, long-term strategic patience as well. Xi's ambitions are very clear and timeline driven. That informs China's negotiating posture. But for today, I would say that China still needs more stability at way more than the U.S. does. So in this moment, the strategic and economic leverage, I would say, leans towards Washington. But this, as Daniel said, is not a one-sided equation. China plays the long-term game, and today's cooperation sits atop I would say, deep and enduring rivalry. Both know what's at stake, and neither wants to look like they walked away weaker.
Right, and of course, referring to him as a great leader of a great country, while Trump was, praising Xi Jinping, Daniel, but he's also, when we talk about Xi Jinping, has also gone on to say that they don't see eye to eye on many things, and that's been in the past. However, moving forward, they really need to be friends and partners. That is something that he stressed upon. That is the place that Xi Jinping is coming from, and that, he's gone on to stress that history has taught us that what reality really demands. Do you feel in these times technology could be a unifying factor here?
Well, first, I want to say I think that's totally fair by Priyanka. And I would agree that when we measure the relative power of the two states, the United States does have the upper hand. The reason I think it's a little bit less lopsided in this particular negotiation is simply because I think Trump is so concerned with commerce itself and less with the broader strategic implications. Now, when it comes to whether or not technology can be a unifying force here, I think that's what you said, technology. Please correct me if I'm wrong. I'm a little bit skeptical simply because I think that this is one of the fundamental issues, that the United States' power advantage comes from the fact that it has access to technologies that China does not. Now, it's possible that Xi will be able to play into Trump's desire to have some sort of splashy trade agreement to lessen the trade deficit in order to get some of the chips that he wants in order to reduce export controls, and that in that sense it can serve as a kind of unifying factor. But again, I really do think that the United States' strategic community beyond Trump, if you go to the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, who's also the National Security Advisor, they really want the United States to maintain its technological edge. And I think that's going to be a really hard line for China to ultimately cross, no matter what kind of good noises we see come out of, the subsequent days.
Right. Priyanka, when we talk about, this very crucial meeting that's taking place in South Korea right now, how concerned should India be? And, given the fact that Prime Minister Modi has always spoken about his relationship with Donald Trump, but here we have Donald Trump talking about another good friend of his, somebody that he hasn't met in 6 years. This is the first time he's meeting ever since he returned to office, and the first since 2019.
India shouldn't be alarmed by this meeting, but it should be alert and strategic. If today's meeting produces a more cooperative U.S.-China tone, India loses some of the geopolitical advantage that it has that came when Washington leaned extra hard toward New Delhi as a counterweight to China. So a thaw between the world's two biggest powers always compresses diplomatic space for countries like India, which are also in that space. But this is not, I would say, a reset of strategic competition. It's sort of a tactical cooling off period. The US-China rivalry isn't going anywhere. Both leaders have made that clear. Supply chain diversification, technology security, the Indo-Pacific strategy, these remain in motion, and India remains central to all of them. So for India, this moment is about positioning, not panic, so to say. What India should do now is accelerate the India-US trade track. Don't wait for the US to focus. Don't wait for the US focus to shift. It should also reinforce its value as a trusted manufacturing and tech partner. It should continue strengthening defense and maritime partnerships via the Quad, the Indian Ocean, the Indo-Pacific. India should also stay vigilant on China's military posture, especially along the LAC and in the Indian Ocean. And it should also bolster semiconductor, AI, and supply chain policy to lock into long-term relevance. So India shouldn't see today as a setback, but it should see it definitely as a signal to move faster, especially since both leaders are carrying this warm and friendly tone. Because a US-China handshake doesn't change the long-term power equation, and India's role still remains critical. So the smart response is confidence, not concern, backed by speed and strategy, especially on the US-India trade deal.